Our first speaker tonight is Elvira Barriga. Elvira is the creative director of the Brands and Environments team at Blotto Design, a group comprised of globally selected graphic designers, architects, UX designers, product designers, researchers, and managers. She's responsible for developing and realizing design solutions at the intersection of brands and environments. She's worked with prominent museums and galleries, cultural and governmental institutions, universities, publishers, architects and developers, as well as global brands, including the National Gallery at Hamburger Bahnhof, Art and Exhibition Hall of the Federal Republic of Germany, Royal Ontario Museum, European Parliament, Harvard University, New World Development, Mini BMW Group, GE, Estée Lauder, Unilever, and Samsung, and that's just to name a few. Please welcome Elvira Barriga.
Hello, everyone. Does this sound good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Fancy crowd. Amazing. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invite. I'm very excited to be here, obviously. And I want to give you a little bit of an introduction about our studio today, because we're not a tech company. And then I want to show you what I think we do best and we might maybe hopefully do different, so you can take something home that is kind of new. And that's basically, foremost, I want to focus on research process and how we engage stakeholders and how that actually fuels ideation, because I think it does not start at ideation, it starts a little bit earlier. So about BMD, Blotto Design, we are a multidisciplinary design firm, we heard that before, specializing in brands and environments. And what that means is that really we work on many aspects of brands, from strategy to identity, environments, digital applications, and print and packaging. And what we do best, hopefully, is when we're actually able to work on as many aspects as possible in order to create really holistic experiences and integrated brand experiences. And we are 4 teams in Toronto, and we have a studio in LA currently, and I'm leading, as introduced, I'm leading the Brands and Environments team from the creative side. And I want to show you a little video about us that we produced for the Wired conference to give a little bit of context.
One of the things that we're constantly doing is trying to help brands tell clearer stories, have a deeper impact with their audiences. And space has the possibility to do that on a very large scale. Spatial design, architectural design, has the potential to engage all 5 senses. And when you think about all of those in terms of creating emotional connection with your customers, that's a fantastic opportunity.
Brand environment design really bridges the gap between architecture and communications. It could be a pop-up experience, it could be an exhibition, it could be a trade show, a retail environment, it could be a corporate brand environment, all the way through to full fan experience design of a stadium.
I think the most important thing for me as still the designers, what we are really excited about and what we really believe in is this multidisciplinary team, not only in terms of fields of expertise, also having people with different cultural backgrounds, different field of references, all that. You bring that together, that's powerful.
I think it's a really important part of brands' toolkit in how they position themselves in the world, how they speak about themselves, how they communicate their values, and how they make that connection to their audiences, both internal and external.
One of our other favorite stories is when we heard from the employees of this global company that all of a sudden they enjoyed much more coming to work on a daily basis. the essence of it, I think, is that you can create real experiences. You can really connect in a real physical space to real people in real time.
We fundamentally believe that design can transform organizations, and we believe space is a big part of that. To see people excited and happy and using the space in innovative ways, that ultimately that's why we do it.
Real people in real time. It's always a little awkward to hear oneself, but so let's talk about ideation. So coming from Europe, I'm pretty well acquainted with a process that is very much driven by form and aesthetics. So you get a brief, you hope you understand it, you kind of disappear into your creative igloo and trying to look for inspiration in your fields of references. There might be this fancy typeface you always wanted to use. There might be this amazing design competition you really want to win. And you come back to the presentation with the client, and if you have a good intuition, you're a good designer, and you kind of share the same design sensibilities. You might be kind of all right, and you do a little bit of post-rationalization as a little decoration, and everything might be well. The problem is, if your design sensibilities are not the same, I don't know if anybody else in here has ever been into that situation, but then you end up in these taste discussions, and I think that's something that is really painful, and that is something I personally really don't enjoy. So when I joined Blotto Design 3 years ago almost, I was really happy to see a process in place that was very much informed by research and driven by concept. And we really and truly believe that a deep mutual understanding from all sides and all partners involved of the goals, of the aspirations of all partners and so forth, that this is basically what really fuels your ideation process and what in the end produces the most beautiful and hopefully impactful outcomes. So what we're trying to get to with these research processes is really to kind of understand more of the context we're working in. So we're trying to understand the client side and really understand them. Listening in a way, I think we all know this kind of listening where you just wait until the other one has finished so that you can make your point. But really listening with empathy and really with this kind of, I want to understand where you're coming from, is a really different story. And I think that also belongs to other areas of our personal life sometimes. But it's interesting to observe that and to really go into a meeting with this kind of, I want to understand really like what are your challenges and so forth. But we also want to understand what's the audience, what is their mindset, what is their needs, what are their needs, what is their behavior. And that is basically where, when we then craft our brand and communication goals, and then in the middle of that is where our work basically happens. So these are kind of the basic components of our research process, and what is important to understand is that it's not set in stone, and if you're designing a business card for your massage therapist, you probably don't need a 4-week research process in order to get there. But the more complex the project is and the more stakeholders are engaged, I think the more valuable it is like these different steps are, and we really customize it for each and every project and like see how much do we need, because it is time, it means money and so forth. But we truly believe the value of this process, and we really engage a lot in that. And where we basically want to get to at the end of this process is to go back with a presentation of our research outcome and present basically our key insights, which is it's kind of a debrief, but much, much deeper. And this confirmation, have we really understood what we're trying to get to together? And then from there, and in this presentation, and before we go into the design process, we created design guidelines, and we get confirmation from the client on that. So we collaborate on this in this moment, like, okay, is this what informs our process? These kind of design guidelines inform our process internally, but it also acts as a kind of a checklist for us, but also then with the client when we evaluate design solutions, and that's what gets you out of the taste discussions. So as I said, we truly believe in the benefits of an immersive research process, and that is one of many reasons why we don't really like pitches, and we very rarely participate in them, and it has to be a pretty big opportunity, but because you're basically kind of lost in the fog, and there's really no chance to really collaborate with the client. But of course, sometimes when the opportunity is big enough, we do it. So about a year ago, we were asked by a developer in Hong Kong to develop a brand strategy for K11, which is a luxury retail and art brand. And we had these 4 lines of brief: develop a brand strategy that focuses on the brand core of art and retail, that allows for systematic growth and expansion, makes the brand culturally relevant, and enhances the digital brand experience. That was it. It's pretty good. So what we actually did is we consulted with the architects who were working on many projects for them to get a little bit of more context, which helped a lot, and they were really great in that, and they gave us a lot of insights. And one of the insights we had, and what we already knew, is what the CEO had an incredible short attention span. It's probably around 5 seconds. So, and you need there's some depth to answer all those questions. So what we did was we actually produced a short video, about 2 minutes, to kind of encapsulate all our thoughts, and in order to get his attention and take it from there. And I will also, not a disclaimer, all I will show about this project is concept work and work that we at the end did not go with, and that was not confirmed. Because the project is still on the road and there's confidentiality around that, but I can show some of the work our pitch work, and then also some of the concepts that finally did not get ruled out. Okay, so. That definitely got us the attention from the CEO, and he actually stayed for a 45-minute presentation with us after that, which was amazing. We got the project and came out with the next brief out of the same meeting, which was, I want K11 to be branded like a museum. Okay, we take it from there. And I hate yellow and black. We're like, one of your brands is yellow and black. Okay, anyways. So we went back from Hong Kong to Toronto and asked ourselves, okay, what actually makes a brand look and feel like a museum? We kind of have a feeling for it, but really. So here comes desk research into place. We analyzed around, I think, 25 to 30 successful museum brands, and from the MoMA to the New Museum, Haus der Kunst, but also associated brands like Frieze and so forth, UCCA, which was easy to analyze because we did it. And what was actually really surprising for me to find out that, wow, like there's so much that these brands have in common. We were actually able to create a super clear analysis of that, and there were obviously really like very clear cues on how to make a visual identity look and feel like a museum. So, and then we showed that back to the client. We compared it to the collateral audit of them. We didn't need to say too much about that, which helps a lot when you have such a piece in the front and you don't need to really say, and your stuff looks like, because all you want to say is, here are our guidelines, and it doesn't match, so it's not personal or whatever. So from this research piece, we really derived these super clear guidelines that were, it's a combination of what they told us and what we found out in our research. So, okay, sophisticated, what does it mean? Minimal, type-driven, a lot of black and white, and so forth. And then we came back with 3 branding directions, 2 new ones and one based on their existing logo was kind of a refresh. And I'm gonna show you just a little bit of it, kind of our favorite solution, which was based on this really bold, super present, minimal, geometric forms logo that could also be, I need sound. That could also be a content holder for art and videos and so forth. We showed how it worked as a sub-brand system, showed them some applications and promotion collateral, so how can it become to life. And the CEO loved it, the key stakeholder group loved it, but they wanted to go with the refreshed version because they wanted to keep a certain connection to the existing brand, which we completely understood. So we went back home, but they were super happy. And all good, so we went back home. We developed for about 3 months, we developed a whole brand platform, including a huge wayfinding and signage system based on their feedback. Came back to Hong Kong, presented that. Unfortunately, I cannot show that, but it was amazing. And they were super happy, loved it, all great. The CEO keep telling about the refresh. He always said, it's like really good plastic surgery. Nobody really knows why you're looking better, but you look so much better. So we thought we did a great job. And then I think about like 3 to 4 weeks later, we got a mail where we're like, I think it was the marketing group, I guess. They kind of put in their veto, and they decided to go with the old logo. That was kind of a bummer after a month of really hard work and really good work. But my point is that is exactly why we usually try to engage like all the stakeholders and especially the decision group far earlier in the process, which is very hard to do in China. But so that's why I want to talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement. So how do we do that? Like, how do we collaborate with our clients to not be like, okay, we're here, you there, we're like disappearing, but how do we kind of make this our project together? Because one really amazing thing about collaboration is, and finding out things together is, it's much more unlikely that they will refuse a design solution if they have actually participated in creating it. So that's just one of the things. So we have the desk research part usually at the beginning, and what we do after that, based on that, we develop a question guide, and we conduct around usually about like 4 to 7 interviews with some key people, and it's a one-to-one interview on the phone. We record it, and we then get it transcribed. And then we synthesize those. Some of us like to do that analog, some of us like to do that digital, but what we really want to get out of that is like really, okay, what are the key themes and what are we talking about? And sometimes for certain projects, that actually gives you enough information to be able to do your work. So for example, for the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, I wanted to make sure that I do that right. We basically did a pretty extensive desk research phase, did some site tours, did 6 interviews, and then did the synthesis part into the key insights and design guidelines, which were a little bit more open here. But again, this is really the foundation for us, and this is like confirmed by the client and discussed with the client to then go into the next step. And this really allowed us to then define their brand story, clarify their brand architecture, which was pretty complex, and then go into the design process. Showed them their applications, and then last but not least, designed their website. So it really depends on the complexity and on the amount of stakeholders, and especially on the amount of decision makers, how big this how extensive this first phase is. But when the project is very complex and there are a lot of open questions that you need to solve, then for us workshops come into place. And what it basically is, it kind of provides just a different setting for a different kind of conversation. And why do we host workshops? Excuse me. Well, first of all, it convenes people, and that is something that is not to be underestimated. It focuses on generative tasks, so it's usually very productive. It produces different answers and outcomes because you're able to ask your questions in a different way. It gets you loads of information very quickly, so usually those workshops are around like half-a-day workshops. And it provides spice for insights and revelations that usually don't appear, but it's really amazing when you set these things up, all of a sudden, like what you never heard before, all of a sudden appears at the theme. You're like, whoa. And most important, it builds consensus, and that's really crucial. That if all the main stakeholders are there and the main decision makers, they are part of this, they hear what everybody else is saying, and so it's no big surprise. And when we come back with a suggestion or whatever, because it is really based on what they've heard too. So sorry. So those workshops all look very different. They're all kind of customized. We have our tools in place, but they're pretty different in nature based on the needs and challenges. And over the years at BMD, we've created a pretty huge repertoire of tools, and we're still kind of developing them, and it kind of develops and moves forward. And I just want to quickly show you some of them that we kind of tend to come back to. Language definitions, for example. I think most of us know that in many briefs we have all these words that are so widely used that they kind of pretty much lost their meaning. So what we're trying to find out with those, like, what does innovation mean for you? Like, what does creativity mean for you? All these big words, and we all have ideas about them, but do we have the same ideas as our clients? Key tensions, great tool to find that, like, to work with the client through contradiction. It's like the classic, we really want to be rooted in our history, but we want to be forward facing. So yeah, where? And maybe there is a point in the middle, but that is something to like clarify and work through with them. Most of these exercises can be like individual exercises, or you can also set them up as group exercises. An exercise I personally love a lot is, we call it future headlines. So you basically let them draw, scribble, rate what they want to read about their project in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years in certain kind of media. And it really shows you how does success look like for them. And it's also, this was a really interesting one. It was also about naming, and they all had different ideas, and it was really interesting to see which name do they use in order to talk about where they want to be at in 5 years. And last but not least, and that's a little bit further down the road, it's usually not in the research process, but actually at the end of the first concept phase, we do scenario workshops where we have basically 3 scenarios pretty flushed out. And so we're working with the client through the implications that certain decisions have. So, okay, if we go down the road, this and this will happen. These are the challenges, these are the opportunities, and we work together with them through those. And that's that's been a pretty successful tool too. But it takes a lot of time to prepare, and which would be a whole different lecture in its own. And that brings me to my last case study, which is the American Accounting Association. When they came to us, I never thought that I would use that as a case study at some point. It's a membership organization for accountants in academia, and they have around 8,000 members worldwide. And it's an absolutely incredible group of women, super smart and empathetic, that lead that association, and it's pure leadership inspiration. If you ever do something about leadership, you have to invite them. It's great. So they came to us this spring, and they asked us to help them on several pieces. So they are pretty aware that there are some major changes happening in the academic landscape, and they want to be responsive to that, but also kind of have be a little bit more courageous about having a more crucial leadership voice in society in general. So they asked us to help them clarify their vision and define their vision, but also most importantly communicate that to their members at their annual meeting with around 3,000 members that they have in the summer. They also asked us to work on the collateral and to redesign their website, and they obviously needed help on that. So we did our desk research. We conducted around, I think, 6 interviews through a cross-section of their main stakeholders. And there were several key themes that kind of came out of that. And we used those in order to prepare a workshop that we held with around 50 of their key members in Orlando around a month later. And so we took those key themes and turned them into provocations that were supported by some questions, and then worked with different, I think we had 8 groups or something and 8 stations, and worked with them through those and kind of collected their answers and what came up in the discussions and so forth. And it was not only a huge success in kind of like opening a discussion platform for them and make sure that their key members are aware of the key challenges for them. It was also crucial for us to really have enough information and also understanding their people. And it's a very academics are usually very well educated and super smart. They still can be very conservative. That's not a contradiction necessarily. So we had to understand, who are their progressive people? Who are their kind of people who are afraid of change? And how do we respond to that also with our piece of communicating the vision to them? So, but it also informed our design process for the collateral and so forth. So we took those main key insights and derived from that guidelines. So we thought, okay, if you want to be thought leaders, you are actually thought leaders, they are. You have to express a certain notion of being confident and visionary. If you want to be society serving, you have to be accessible and relevant, and so forth. And then we went one step further and made that even a little bit more to the point for our designs. So okay, that means you need to be contemporary but not trendy, bold, type-driven, reduced, clean, precise. It was pretty detailed guidelines, but that then helped us when we came back and showed them kind of 4 iterations of the design. What we wanted to get to is to kind of smoothly move them away from their comfort zone, which is kind of a cleaned up version from what they had, and they expected just this. They didn't ask us for a new design, so to say, but we kind of through that wanted to show them, and if you're on the other spectrum, you're actually representing what you're trying to express. And they totally embraced that. And the final collateral looked like this. I really wish I could have been there to make a picture of Condoleezza Rice with our name tag. But no. And then we went into the web part. And I think most of you are very familiar on that, so I'm not going to dwell on this. But of course, studied the analytics in order to really understand the user needs and their behaviors. What are the content types they're really looking for? How do they connect the different content types? And it's a pretty complex and extensive website. And okay, what is the mindset of the users, like which informed our information architecture and so forth, competitive analysis to understand what the categories are. And then we did also some qualitative research. So we did some user testing and tried to see, okay, like what frustrates the people, what works, what doesn't work, and so forth. And then after content mapping, information architecture, design development, you all know that. We designed a responsive website, and it is currently in programming phase, and I think it's a little bit of an improvement from where they were. And last but not least, I'm gonna show you the video we created then for their annual meeting conference in order to communicate their new vision, and I hope that all together creates a bigger picture. This is for academics, so it's not for fancy designers. That's why it has a slightly different mode than the others. So the annual meeting was a huge success, and so was the whole process and the outcome for all parties involved. There was an enormous amount of mutual respect for each other's expertise and an incredible openness also from the client and appreciation for true collaboration. So happy client, happy designers, happy creative director. And so finally, just as a summary, all I want to give you is this idea that I think ideation does not start at the moment where you start to scribble yourself and you kind of like start to come up with a solution, but really in this process of engaging the client, really understanding them, and that really makes the process afterwards much faster, and we truly believe in this. So thank you.